So hi VC, how you doing? This has been quite a big week for me because I think for the first time in living memory, I've probably sold more records this week than I bought. And that really doesn't happen very often. But I realised if I carried on buying the way I was, well, it's going to run out of space, quite simply. Pretty much already have. So just been laziness on my part because I've got a huge, corner of the room taken up with stuff I want to sell, stuff that I've picked up cheap, meaning to trade in, or things I've weeded out from my collection. So I'm finally getting around to moving some of it on. But anyway, don't worry, I have been buying stuff. I'm going to show you some recent purchases today. Some of these date back to that trip up to the northeast that I mentioned a couple of videos back, and a mixture of online buys, record store buys, and the odd thing from record fairs, and a mixed bag as always. So let's get to it. And first up is Stomu Yamashita's Go, live from Paris. Now, Stomu Yamashita, or Yamashita, pronunciation. He's a Japanese multi-instrumentalist. He mainly a percussionist, and Go is basically a bit of a supergroup he put together. And it really is a supergroup. You've got Steve Winwood on vocals and keyboards, Michael Shreve on drums, who of course was in Santana. Aldi Meola plays guitar and plays some fantastic guitar on here. And Klaus Schulze is on synthesizers and keyboards as well. And you get guest appearances from various other people like Pat Thrall on guitar. But this is a really good album. It's a double live album on the Island label. And it's hugely underrated, as is Stomu Yamashita generally. I could almost have put some of his albums in my "These albums are way too cheap" video, the last one I did, because they don't seem to go for a lot of money, and the quality of the music is just something else. This is as much sort of funk, fusion, soul, and trippy space rock as it is prog, I suppose. But it is all of those things and more. On here you've got Klaus Schulze creating some atmospheric, spacey sort of intros on a lot of songs. Highlights are too many to mention, but I will mention some. Time Is Here, which is second track on side 2. It's like a three-way jam between metal era Pink Floyd, Funkadelic, and the Wailers, if you can imagine that. And it is really good. And then side 3, you've got a track called Crossing the Line. And that's a real Aldi Meola showcase. He just takes you to another planet with his playing. I think it's about, that's 7.5 minutes long track. So Aldi Meola takes you to another planet, and then Steve Winwood's vocal when it comes in is just so soulful. It just brings you right back down to earth. Beautiful, beautiful song. And then the final track on the album, Space Requiem, is all sort of interweaving piano and bass, and Klaus Schulze's synths almost sound like a bit of a solar wind. And then you've got these female vocals, sort of wordless vocals, which bring to mind Pink Floyd's Great Gig in the Sky. And it's just a fantastic song, and the whole record is fantastic. So if you're not familiar with Stomu Yamashita, check him out, because you can do so pretty cheaply. And he's got quite an extensive back catalogue. I've got, I guess, 4 or 5 of his albums, and I wouldn't know which one to recommend, but if you can pick this one up, I got this for a £5. This was one of the ones I got in Durham, a place called the Record Shed, I think it's called, and that's in a sort of indoor market up there. And it's a fairly small sort of unit within the market, but I picked up a couple of things there, and this was probably the highlight. £5 for a double album. I mean, can't go wrong. And then My favourite record shop locally at the moment is probably Shack's Stacks of Wax in Kingston. And I didn't go for a couple of years because of COVID, but it's well worth a visit, and the place is overflowing with stock. And for that reason, Shack tends to put stuff out at a really reasonable price. I mean, too many record shops just look on Discogs, think, okay, what's the maximum I can charge for this, and bang it out. So there's no incentive to go to a record shop anymore because you can just get them online. But at Shack's, it's different. Nice guy, great shop, quick turnover of stock, and he has some interesting stuff. And I picked up this, which I've never seen before. Puzzle, took a chance on it. There's the guys in the band, you can see them. It's on the Motown label, and it's definitely not what you would consider sort of archetypal Motown sound. I'm surprised it wasn't put out on the Rare Earth label, which was one of the which was a Motown subsidiary where they tended to put their slightly more, I guess, progressive and very often white acts on there, because it would definitely fit in there. But this is basically tasteful jazz rock fusion slash horn rock. So, you know, the usual influences: Blood, Sweat and Tears, Chicago, the Ides of March. But it's got a little bit more than a lot of those bands. I mean, I'm not averse to a bit of horn rock anyway, but this goes beyond the normal sort of remit of horn rock. On tracks like Sweet Delirium, second track on side 2. And that's just got a fantastic groove. I mean, it's a real head nodder. Great stuff. But the highlight is probably the Grosso, or the Grosso, which is the last track on side 1, which is quite a long track. And it's really where prog rock meets horn rock. And it's a really interesting fusion of those two styles. And just elevates it from a normal, slightly elevator jazz rock kind of feel that horn rock can fall into. So, again, I picked that up cheap. I think that was a £5 as well. So it was definitely worth a punt. Then here's another one I picked up at Shack's, and it was another blind buy. And he had it priced where I just thought there's not much risk in taking a chance on that one. And it was George Edwards' group, Archives. And no, I knew nothing about this. I think I tried to do a little kind of Google search on it in the shops, and it was described as Psych. And I thought, okay, I think I paid £9 for this. And this came out in 2011, but it's basically tracks recorded by these two guys in the late 70s and early 80s in Detroit. And the two guys in question are Raymond George and Edward Balian. And I've seen this, you know, since doing a more thorough sort of search online, described as Big Star meets the Silver Apples. So you're talking power pop and experimental electronic psychedelia. I'd add early Pink Floyd and synth pop into the mix of influences there. And it really is an eclectic mix of electro synth music, dirges, ballads, and psychedelia. It's very experimental, and it's a really, really good listen. And I'm surprised you don't hear this one talked about more, probably because it wasn't released in the 60s, so people can be a little bit snobbish about stuff isn't original 60s psych. But these guys have produced some amazing music here. And this is a comp. They did put out an independent self-financed release called 38:38 in 1977. They only pressed 100 copies, and most of those got sent off to record companies, trying to find a deal, which never materialised. And it wasn't until 2009 that a crate digger found a copy of the album and word started to spread. And eventually this album got put out, and this is more material from the era the first album came out in 1977, and it is fantastic. You've got, well, the first track's called Once Upon a Moog, or a Moog, and that is a complete Moog showcase. Second track, Nevada, is all strummed acoustic guitars, dreamy vocals, and a quality guitar solo. I mean, elsewhere you've got like belligerent synth grooves, spacey electronics, fuzzed out guitars. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. In fact, the final track is possibly my favourite on here, Midnight Asylum. And it's just total tripped out, spacey Psych soundscapes. They never stopped looking for success. They never stopped recording. I think to this day they're still recording. And if you can find a copy of this, check it out, because it's a really good listen. So much better than a lot of overhyped experimental music that goes for a lot more money. Another compilation here, Electric Banana, 70s. And for those who don't know, Electric Banana was basically the Pretty Things recording under an assumed name, and they recorded a fair bit of material for the DeWolf sound library under the name Electric Banana, recorded in the 60s and in the 70s, and this is a compilation of the vocal tracks from the two albums they recorded in the 70s. And stylistically, it's, as you'd expect, pretty close to the sort of stuff that the Pretty Things were putting out in the 70s. So albums like Silk Torpedo and Savage Eye. But there are the odd exceptions. I mean, it's a lot of it has that kind of stonesy hard rock groove that the Pretty Things had then. But the track Maze Song has a real kind of James Gang groove to it, and that is a real highlight on here. And there's a track, last track on side one, Walk Away, which starts with guitar solo over a very sort of Ray Manzarek style electric harpsichord, and has this beautiful dreamy sort of lysergic vocal over the top, and it really harks back to the Pretty Things sort of 60s psychedelic sound. It's a fantastic guitar solo, and fat driving bass sort of pummels you until the end of the track and then fades away. Really, really good stuff. And this is one that came out on Record Store Day back in 2018. It's Gordon Jackson's Thinking Back. And I have to say that's an awful cover, but I can't be too critical because it's Gordon Jackson's daughter on the cover, so obviously means a lot to him. But if I didn't know what I was buying, I'd assume this was some dreadful, easy listening album. But looks can be deceptive because this is a great album. Originally came out in 1969. This 2018 reissue came with a free 7-inch single, which I've just realised I never actually listened to. I've got it tucked away somewhere. Must give that a listen. And Gordon Jackson was a member of an early sort of incarnation of Traffic, when they were called Deep Feeling. And in fact, gets Traffic, ropes him into play on this album, and Dave Mason produces it. So you've basically got a lost Traffic album here. Jackson plays tabla and sitar and acoustic guitar and sings, and his voice is in that kind of typical loner folk singer-songwriter sort of style. You know, not a hugely strong voice, but a pleasant, appealing voice. You've got Chris Wood from Traffic here playing a load of sax. Dave Mason plays bass on here, some great snaking bass lines, as well as producing and playing guitar, of course, which you'd expect. And there are some very tasty guitar solos on here, which really sort of elevate the songs out of their slightly soporific acoustic vibe. But I can't recognise this album. I can't recognise it. I can't recommend it highly enough. Came out on the Sunbeam Records label. And being a reissue and on a quality label, also comes with quite an extensive write-up in the booklet here. So I suppose overall, apart from Traffic being the obvious sort of touch point here, it kind of has the similar sort of stench of patchouli oil that bands from the sort of Ladbroke Grove scene from the late 60s had, people like Quintessence. So if that's your bag, you'll definitely enjoy this. And don't be put off by the cover. And I managed to get this a sealed brand new copy on Discogs. I think I paid £7 for it, so it's not going for a huge amount of money, so well worth checking out. Now, it's an album I've had in my collection for years, and when I bought it, I listened to it, thought, yeah, it's not bad. Stuck it on the shelf, didn't listen to it again. And it was only through reading up on the band Capability Brown, who I love, that I realised that that band had sort of morphed into Crazy Cat at one point. So I went back and re-explored their second album and loved it, so I had to go and get their debut. So Crazy Cat, China Seas, beautiful artwork there. And if you're familiar with Capability Brown, you'll kind of know what to expect here. Similar sounding, I suppose. This perhaps is slightly more commercial, but the common factor is that it contains some immaculate vocal harmonies. I mean, that was the big Capability Brown thing. It's almost Queen-like. And this is a mix of acoustic and heavier tracks with some sort of barroom type piano in there as well. And it's progressive pop rock with elements, I suppose, of City Boy, Pilot, Ambrosia. So again, bands with big harmonies who aren't afraid of a strong melody. But there are hints as well on the first track, 30 Love, a bit of a Wishbone Ash twin guitar feel. And there's some real slick FM radio white boy funk on here as well. The track No Smoke Without Fire is definitely in that kind of vein, and Chilly Wind. Again, more slick funk in the style of Wild Cherry. You know, play that funky music, white boy. Yeah. Pristine production, vocals to die for, and some real bubbling bass lines. I mean, it's really classy stuff. If you're not afraid for your prog to get a bit more commercial and embrace a few other styles, you'd probably get off on this. I mean, I sat on it for too long. I mean, I've seen this album numerous times and didn't pick it up because I was thinking, yeah, I've got their other album. I'm not sure I rated it that highly. I just haven't listened to it properly. So definitely can recommend this. And again, pretty cheap to pick up. I think I paid for a fiver for that one. So there you go. Now here's one that I put off buying for a long time. I was intrigued. I thought this could be really interesting. I'd only seen it online. I thought it's a cheap album, but when you add in postage, it ends up not being such a cheap album. I didn't want to take the risk. But then I saw a copy out in the wild, and it was dirt cheap. Thought this is my chance to find out what this really sounds like, because you can't find tracks off this online, or at least I haven't been able to. It's Molky Cole's self-titled album from 1977. And, you know, some interesting artwork there. There's the gatefold. Now the band photo will either draw you in or repel you. yeah, any band with makeup, particularly when it's that kind of clown makeup, can be a little bit divisive. And that's part of the problem with the band, I think. I don't think they quite knew what they were aiming for. There you go, it's on the Janus label. And this is a kind of an odd mix of hard rock, Beatlesque pop, soft rock, and a bit of comedy larking about, really, but thankfully not too much. They do play it pretty straight. On the whole, it is soft rock, similar to kind of Pilot. Again, I'm always mentioning Pilot, but there's a lot of bands with that kind of 70s soft rock, intelligent pop sound. Although there's a track on here called Everything's Gonna Be Alright, which has a proper heavy rock riff on it, and proggy synth washes, again big vocal harmonies. Keep coming back to those, they're just so much my thing. So it is a bit all over the place. It's a really good pop album with some hard rock elements, and I think you can kind of tell from listening to him and looking at the band pictures, they can't decide whether they're, you know, the American sensational Alex Harvey band or Pilot. So they kind of fall between two stools. But for what I paid for the album, which was again under £5, I'm not complaining, and I'm giving it a lot of time on my turntable at the moment. I'm really enjoying this. So see it cheap, don't sleep on it. Decent stuff. Then my final record of today is one that will definitely appeal to fans of Hawkwind and Gong and that kind of psychedelic space rock weirdness. And it's Melodic Energy Commission's Migration of the Snails. And it is as weird as it sounds. As the label there says, it features Del Detmar, who used to provide lots of sort of squelching, farting synth noises for Hawkwind, and does the same on here. And this little Canadian, they released this album in 1980, and they've released a number of albums, I think, but this is my introduction to them. Fairly large band, plenty of weird instrumentation. There's a mix of male and female vocals, but they are vocals in inverted commas, as they're sort of more a way of creating another layer of sound rather than particularly melodic singing. They're often more like sort of incantations or mantras and can be quite creepy at times. In fact, what's the track? Off on a Current, I think it is. No, Escargot, French for snail, Canadian band. Reminds me a lot of kind of Dr. John in his sort of Gree era, and that was pretty creepy music, lots of sort of chanted kind of vocals. So yeah, it's definitely in that sort of ballpark. So I've described them as cosmic psych folk, krautrock weirdness with a fairly relaxed attitude to song structure. Definitely more of a vibe than a collection of songs you'll go away whistling. But I can thoroughly recommend it. It's really, really good stuff. And I bought this online, new and sealed, and it goes pretty cheaply. So yeah, you might want to snap that up while you can. Right, so there you go. That's some of my recent purchases. Hope you're all doing okay. I will see you again soon. Take care.